Welcome to Creative. Today I'm interviewing Peter Owen-Jones. Peter's an Anglican priest and the vicar at Firle Church. Firle is a beautiful Sussex village that sits at the foot of the South Downs. Apart from being a vicar, Peter is a TV presenter and has written a number of books and also does a lot of poetry. And some of his programs I find very cool, actually, notably Extreme Pilgrim and Around the World in 80 Faiths, which are certainly worth checking out if you can find them on YouTube. I found this interview really inspiring, and I'd like to thank Peter for his time, because he's a very busy man. And I hope you enjoy the interview. So today we've got some musical accompaniment by our guest, and I'm sitting in the beautiful Firle Church on the South Downs, and the person playing guitar is not me, for a change. It's Peter Owen-Jones. Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
So, my usual first question is, what do you do?
I'm not sure what I do anymore. 30 years ago I would have said I'm training to be a priest, but now I'm not sure I know what I do anymore. I think, and I'm not sure I want to be, almost defined by what I do. What I spend most of my time doing is the work of a parish priest. But then there are so many parts of us, I would say, that what goes on the outside is often very different from what's happening on the inside. And as a man, I think we're each invited, every human being is invited to take the journey into authenticity. And so right now I'm working on that.
That's a great answer. Because what interested me about the prospect of talking to you is that I see that journey as exactly the process that an artist goes through, a musician goes through. You know, you start off with this idea that you're going to be doing this, and there's like a little set of parameters. You think, oh, you know, I've got to learn the scales and the chords and the technique and blah, blah, blah. And then after a period of time, that sort of almost sort of falls away. And then you start realising that there's this journey that you're going on somehow.
Absolutely.
Of discovery. And often, you know, when I've sort of interviewed people, that's the type of thing that comes up, and the sort of the weirdness of what happens on that journey, where something happens to you by chance, if you sort of mean.
Yeah.
And then sometimes those things are not very nice, but they lead to something extraordinary.
Absolutely they do.
So let's go back a little bit to, you know, when you started off your life, you weren't involved in the church, from what I can make out.
I think we're all involved in the church.
Well, perhaps we are. But what, your early work life wasn't like that?
No, I was Yeah, I started work as a farm labourer. I was always, I'm a country boy.
Right.
There are not many of us left.
No.
And now I started working on farms when I was 14.
What, in this area?
Yeah, about 30 miles north of here.
Oh.
I had a great friend, and he grew up on a farm. His name is Stephen Champion. He's now a photographer. He lives in Sri Lanka. We kind of fell in, and it was just very natural. Again, it didn't feel like work.
No.
Being a parish priest doesn't feel like work.
No.
And so, yeah, I was lambing and hay baling, and then I went on to another farm owned by this extraordinary man, an Irishman who'd been injured running up the beaches on the D-Day landings. He'd been shot, and he was invalided out of the army and had never farmed, but was offered this farm and took it. I mean, in today's world, that would never happen. And he was an extraordinary man. And I would work for him occasionally, and he'd yell at me a lot. And but we kind of really got each other. We loved each other. And he was a very, his house was full of these paintings, you know. And occasionally he'd get completely broken. He'd have to sell the whole lot, and then he'd start again. But he was an immensely creative human being and influenced me deeply. Yeah, and so I was a country boy.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So, might come back to that, because that sort of resonated with me somewhat. So then after that, what did you do?
After that, I went up in between kind of a lot of sleeping in hedges and meeting some wonderful women. I kind of went up to London, and I never really got on with the education establishment.
Right.
It just didn't. I wasn't interested in it.
No.
Now I'm passionate about learning and philosophy and theology and poetry, but then it just didn't speak to me. I wanted to be out in the woods, or I wanted to be in the heart of the city with all the noise and colour and filth and mayhem. And so I went up to London, did various jobs, and that which was work. I worked as a security guard at the Ideal Home exhibition.
Right. Well, that's a notable.
Yeah, and then I met a whole group of people who were living in squats, and again it was this introduction into this creative way of being. It wasn't on the kind of tram lines of get a job and have a career. They were living completely differently, and they really taught me that you don't have to go in a straight line if you're living. You can go left, you can go right, you can go up, you can go down. You don't have to follow the prescribed route.
No.
And I think a lot of my friends who are artists and writers and a lot of musicians, I don't think any of us, I think all of us have veered off the prescribed route. And I am so grateful to them for living that life and for showing me that what's possible.
That is really interesting. I mean, that culture of the sort of people living in squats, I mean, that is something of a particular period, which I don't know to what extent we've got that now. I don't hear very much of it, unless it's just hidden away.
Yeah.
But certainly, that was, there's so many artists and musicians come from that tradition.
Yeah.
Don't they? Or that existence,
Well, you're kind of, the wires of the requirements of society are slightly looser. You're not so encumbered if you've chosen that way. You're a wanderer, you're a vagrant. You just happen to be living in this place for this time. And it was very, very impermanent. There could be a knock on the door and you'd be out that night. And that does something to you, because you know that, okay, I'm not here forever, this is just, and while I'm here, I'm going to explore what it's like to be here.
Yeah.
I'm not bound by it.
No.
I'm not bound by a mortgage, I'm not bound by rent. I'm just here.
Yeah. I think that's a really powerful place for, you know, that sort of creative thing of this unfixedness. Because when I do I do a lot of these, like, you know, I do this sort of speed learn guitar and this sort of stuff, but I also do one for songwriting, and it's based on the sort of William S. Burroughs type cut-up thing. And once people get their head around this fact that this crazy idea can actually make something happen, because, I mean, on the face of it, because it's just ludicrous, that you can just take a load of random stuff and stick it together, and suddenly you've got a poem, you know.
Absolutely.
And but once people get that, it's like they're off and running. It's that sort of thing of once that, as you said, like the tram lines of you know, what people think they do that. Once you break away from that, it's suddenly it's like you've got all this freedom to bring ideas together.
I agree. I mean, I think creativity is a process of exploration, and no musician, no artist, no writer can truly start to travel unless they travel beyond their own boundaries, beyond the boundaries set by society, and travel into their own places of fear, travel into their own places of delight, travel beyond where they feel comfortable. A lot of the creative process for me is, first of all, it's about forcing myself to sit down, but it's also going to those places which aren't necessarily comfortable for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, how did you get the calling? And you might say, which calling? And then the answer is, it's up to you which calling. So how did it all start off from that perspective, to as we know you?
I feel, again, I've always felt something, because I'm not really, what is a parish priest? What is a priest? The most remarkable thing is that every priest would say they've had a calling. And a calling is, you know, first of all, I just want to say that to be a teacher, you have a calling. To be a musician, you have a calling. It isn't anything greater than any other calling. It's just, I remember just this intense feeling that I was to follow this path. This path was kind of, this door was put in front of me, and I was foolish enough to open it. And but a religious calling, for me, it was almost physical. But no, it was physical. I felt it in the cells of my being that this was the direction I needed to go in. And I think it's all right to know that. I think if you speak to many people in many walks of life, they will describe the same feeling about becoming a landscape architect or about becoming a drummer.
Yes.
And what I'm very keen to emphasize is that, you know, the job of being a parish priest, first of all, is to be broken by life and broken by love. And I would also like to emphasize that it really does not make us any more holy or sanctified than any other human being. The job of the parish priest is to go into the gutter, and most apparently their own gutter. And that's what it is.
Yeah, that's really well said, because again, you know, I can really resonate with this, what you're saying about the call, because I think, you know, people who are musicians and artists, I mean, well, in fact, Mick Jagger said this about Keith Richards, which is who has to play the guitar,
Yes, absolutely.
and that sort of sums that up really for me. It's like there's no choice in that.
Yeah, I think people would have said the same about Jimi Hendrix.
Yes.
I
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I mean, he used to apparently, by all accounts, wherever he travelled, you know, before he was sadly taking vast amounts of heroin, he would never be without his guitar.
He used to take his guitar to the toilet, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah. And so, you know, that's a calling.
yeah, of course it is.
That's a beautiful.
Instead of just a call of nature. Yeah, because I think that is true. Because I've done a lot of sort of NLP stuff from Richard Bandler, who is a great storyteller in his own right. You know, it's sort of the NLP thing is to try to unpick how people do things. You know, and he told a story about because Bandler knew the Grateful Dead and all that sort of crowd, you know. But he told a story about Robin Ford, the blues guitar player. Robin Ford was, I don't know, 13, 14 years of age when Bandler met him. He said, this kid was like incredible. And he said, how'd you do that? And he said, the world just seems a better place when I'm playing a guitar.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so eloquently put.
Oh, beautiful. And he might have said, I don't do it.
Yes.
It does me.
Yes, totally. Just
Yeah.
like songs do you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that process of writing a song, I used to write when I was young and stupid. I'm now old and stupid. It's such a beautiful journey, each one a pathway, a journey into a place that you haven't been before, and that you are discovering, and it is discovering you. And yeah, wonderful. I mean, I now write books and poetry, and it's the same process, but writing a song is such a ride. I'm listening to a lot of classical music at the moment. I'm just there in awe at the men and women who can hear this music. Where is this music coming from? And they're putting it down in notation. I mean, just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. My God.
No, it's extraordinary. And it's not something that you can analyse, really.
No, but again, I mean, I come into this church most mornings, and then I will sit in the porch. And the Sami are a group of nomadic herdsmen from Northern Europe. They are the last supposed European tribal peoples, and they will sit down purposefully by a stream, or they will go into a silver birch wood and listen to the wind in the trees, and listen to the sound of the water, and they will describe that as music. They will describe that musically. I'm not sure in Southern Europe that we hear it that way anymore, but they taught me to hear it as music.
Right, which brings me on to the next thing. So, was this the first parish that you came to?
No, I was a curate up on the Fens near Wisbeach,
Right.
which was an amazing land.
I bet.
And then, I was a parish priest outside Cambridge, which was a very difficult time. And then I was very fortunate enough to come here.
So how long have you been here?
I've been here nearly 17 years. I'm the longest serving priest in one place in Sussex.
Wow.
Yeah, priests tend to move on after 4 or 5 years
Yes.
because we get found out
Yeah.
for the rogues, scoundrels and vagabonds that we are.
Good.
So I've kind of made a deal with the people here. You know,
Right.
when they're drunk in the pub, I help carry them home.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I'm drunk in the pub, they help carry me home.
That sounds like a good deal to me.
And it works out well.
Yeah, and there's a good pub here, isn't there? So you, when you came here then, what was I'm interested in how you started to get involved, being filmed or doing things on radio. What happened there?
When I got out of the car here, I knew I'd found it. I knew I'd found it wasn't kind of like the end of the rainbow, it was the beginning of the rainbow. And I just knew. I looked at the downs, and I didn't grow up that far away from here, but I didn't know that this landscape, this was here.
No.
And then I had a phone call one morning from a man claiming to be from the BBC who said, "I've just read one of your books. We're looking for someone to present a television program. Could he come and have a chat?" And that's how it started.
Right. So there's books then before.
Yes, there were a couple of books before.
So what happened there? I'm trying to piece together.
Yeah.
So that people get
I wrote a book about going through the theological training to be a priest, and then I wrote a book about what it was like being a kind of a first-year priest, and that was one of the books that he'd read.
Wow.
And
Well, I was going to say, it's not exactly a big market, if you see what I mean. Bit of a niche.
No, I hadn't worked that out at that time.
But obviously it did the trick.
Yeah, and then I was standing in front of the camera.
Right. So what was the first thing that you did?
First was a while ago. It was called The Battle for Britain's Soul. It was the story of the spiritual formation of I don't like the word country, but this particular island, and it was the story of the peoples living on this island, their kind of journey with the divine, with how they navigated that reality in their time.
Right.
Leading up to the present day.
So it's quite eclectic, really, when you dig.
Yeah, I mean, we started pre-Christian and then kind of went right the way through.
Wow.
And a lot of research, a lot of learning.
Do you feel that influenced you, or did you influence that? I'm trying to find the right words. Was that a journey of discovery in itself, then? Or not?
It was, I don't know, I mean, I found it, it just came very naturally to me. I didn't really, again, I wouldn't describe it as work.
No.
It was just something that, I remember when I was being interviewed, he said, "I want you to walk and talk to the camera at the same time." And I just did it. It didn't feel like, but he said, very few people can do that. And I had once we'd started filming, he said, you just seem to be able to do it.
But you do a lot of walking anyway.
I do a lot of it. Well, I've always walked since, actually, maybe I haven't thought about that. I've always walked since I was a boy, so yeah, maybe.
Because I think that is something that we've lost from the tradition, that whole idea of like a pilgrimage. That even the mental part of that, we've sort of lost the thing we have to make a journey. And you're never there, but you're always getting there, if you sort of mean.
Oh, beautiful.
You see what I mean?
Oh, no, beautifully said.
Practice is like that. It's like you just have to keep walking.
Yeah, and you have to keep playing, and you have to keep writing.
Exactly.
Even if you write 3 pages of complete drivel, you've done it.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to keep that oiled. You've got to keep that, those joints working.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we've sort of lost that thing of doing the journey, because it's almost like, no, we want to be there now. Yeah, and there's something in the psyche of people where we've lost something there.
I agree. I think that there's a great resurgence taking place of the storytelling tradition, of which Andreas Corneval, Martin Shaw, are all
who
part.
you've had in here.
Absolutely, are all part of. Yeah. But the storytelling tradition is very much earthed in the taking of the journey, and seeing ourselves as individuals on a journey, and I'm very comfortable with that. I'm the whole thing of kind of, it's like these makeover programs that go into houses, that go into gardens, and 24 hours later. No. Live with the space. See what it's saying to you. See how it wants to unfold. And be part of something. Don't impose your will on it.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think songwriting is, you're taking part.
Yeah.
You're not, it isn't, it's, yes, it's you, but it's everything you've ever known.
Yeah.
It's everything coming in.
Yes.
It's the broken heart. It's whatever. But it isn't all about you.
No.
Yeah.
No, I sort of take the sort of the Greek view that the muses are working through you, and you've got to pay them due respect. Otherwise, they'll mess your life up for you.
Otherwise, they
Wreck
will
you.
Wreck you.
Exactly.
You've got to be wrecked once.
Well, yes. Yes, wrecked on schedule. Stephen Jenkinson says. I mean, it's that type of thing. Again, this is you can see where I'm going with this. I think the thing about the process of just being creative, and you are incredibly creative because you write and you do. But I think just any process where you find, like we were saying, whatever that calling is, being a craftsman, being a musician, being a parish priest, or whatever it is. It's the fact you just have to do that stuff. There's not really.
You have to get into that river.
Yeah.
And sometimes that river is going to take you into the most extraordinarily beautiful valleys and chasms, and at other times it's gonna scare the living shit out.
Yes.
But get in the river.
Yeah.
I understand the trepidation involved in doing that, especially if you have to do it consciously. I mean, I think I probably got into the parish priest river almost unconsciously, and definitely the writing and the musician river. But when consciously you have to step into it, that takes courage. But my daughter, my son, have courage. Get into the river. Let it take you where it needs to take you. That's the flow.
Yes.
That's creative flow.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
To the point of not knowing where you're going to end up with the stuff.
Absolutely.
Because that's the thing. Actually, interesting. We went down to Schumacher with Satish.
Yeah.
And June were doing something down there. And obviously for the people that are listening to this, Satish Kumar was a Jain monk originally, and he did this incredible journey from India to London, and then on to America, didn't he? With no money, by foot.
Yeah.
Just mind-boggling. But the interesting thing in the conversation, he'd said, well, before I left India, I'd probably done about 10,000 miles walking up and down India.
Yeah, of course.
As you do.
Yeah.
But he said something fascinating, because he's got a book called No Destination.
Absolutely. And Earth Pilgrim.
Yeah. And he then sort of started talking about like quantum theory.
Yeah.
As you do.
As he does.
Exactly. And I said, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the thing about the electron, the theory is an electron, when does it become a particle or a wave?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like when it's expected to be somewhere in the future, then it does. And it's almost like, is it possible that if you don't actually know where you're going to be, you could be anywhere. You don't limit your possibilities. And
Absolutely.
he said, that is it. This is what you were saying. Don't actually have that destination. You're on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought that was, that was a bit of a revealing moment for me.
But I mean, when you're writing a song, when I'm attempting to write, I might know the direction I want to take, but I have no idea where it's going to take me.
It's sort of directionality.
Yes.
Yes.
And I might, but that's it isn't how I do it. It's much more how it does me.
Yes.
But I don't even want to call it a process. I want to call it Yes, a journey. Every song, every piece of writing, every sermon, dare I say, it almost sets you free. At that point, I'm exploring. I'm without destination, as you have said.
Yeah. It's well said. It's well said. So, what? So we've got, just to sort of do the chronological bit. You started doing things on TV, and obviously that's the first time I became aware of you. I think it was Around the World in 80 Faiths, which I thought was wicked. I loved that.
I loved it too.
Yeah, I bet you did, because you did a lot of travelling.
Oh, yeah.
What were the most? Because I know you've had some extraordinary things, because the pilgrimage one, the extreme pilgrim.
Yeah.
So you've done some really interesting stuff. Out in the Around the World in 80 Faiths, what was the thing that really sort of resonated with you in that? Was there a particular thing you experienced?
I think so. I think the tradition of Satish Kumar, the Jhin tradition, where they live by the principle of doing no harm.
Yeah.
That I found extraordinarily beautiful. And when you hold that up against our Western way of life, you know, it just kind of, that hits you very hard. I'm glad it does. And so I think I was we got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were in an Indian town called Travanbalangala, which is the kind of the central town of the Jhin tradition. And we walked up 400 stone steps, and at the top of this, there's this huge statue of the founder of the Jain faith, Biophony. And it was 6 in the morning, and there must have been 200 people there, and they were having a party. They were pouring milk over his feet and vermilion. I mean, just reduced me to tears. It was so. In terms of a ritual, it was one of the most powerful rituals I've ever experienced. But again, the Jain philosophy of live without harming others and without harming those that we share the planet with. When you look at the crisis of extinction that's going on, when you look at climate change, this is about the harm we are doing. And so I was immensely moved by the Jhin tradition. And I think coming home, since I've been back, I do feel a bit like Frodo Baggins, you know, at the end of the Lord of the Rings. He came home, but whilst he was very much at home, he couldn't really. The journey he had taken kind of had turned him inside out, had affected him deeply, and I'm glad that it did that to me.
Sort of a hero's journey, really, isn't it? Sort of,
yeah, but I think
Joseph Campbell sort of.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, when you come back to something. I think that happens with any experience. That you come back, and even if you're chopping wood and carrying water,
yes,
you're carrying also the burden of what you've experienced.
I think that's right. And as a parish priest, I've taken many funerals of men who fought in the Second World War, and all of their families predominantly say the same thing. They all say he never discussed it.
No.
And I can imagine, living in that way, but just being unable to share what you'd done, what you'd seen, what you'd heard with anyone else.
Yeah,
is it shareable? And I think let's bring it back. It might seem rather crass, but let's bring it back to writing a song. Can I explain? Am I able to share that? Am I able to share what happened to me whilst that happened? If you sat down and spoke to John Lennon and said, how did you write Imagine? How did you write Number 9 Dream? How did you write She Loves You? Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure that anyone can tell you.
No. It's interesting you saying that. The sort of thing within NLP, I don't know how familiar you are with this, of modelling somebody who's good at doing something. You know, you ask them certain questions, and the first thing they say is, I don't know. You know, how do you do such and such? They go, I don't know. And they sort of, and then if you push that a little bit further, they'll say something that seems completely illogical. Yeah. There's an example to this. I did a lot of interviews with classical guitarists and rock guitar players and who like real top of their game. And you say, well, what happened? And I've had replies eventually after I don't know to I watched the people dancing in the room.
Absolutely.
This is a classical guitar player, right?
Of course.
The imaginary Elizabethan people dancing to the sweet pieces that is, you know, and you go like, oh, okay, right.
Yes.
Or you're hearing, somebody's hearing the sound that's coming from the back of their head.
Yes.
You know, all the stuff that you go like, okay, you have to drop the logical thing out.
Yes, you do.
And then just think, right, okay. So, and what we tend to do with that thing about when somebody writes something, as you say, there's not really the logical path. And somebody like Lennon was able, very easy to put himself in a space that he could put the words down that created the context, if you like, of the environment, the feel of what it was. But you can't, and this is where people often go wrong with songwriting from the point of view they try to be literal.
They try to think it.
Yes. So like, I've had a couple of kids trying to write protest songs, and I said, well, the first thing is, if you listen to the great protest song writers, they didn't say, you're doing this and how dare you. They were saying something in a particular way that created the picture of the problem. You know, Dylan and a hard rains are going to fall.
They're talking about a story.
Totally.
They're telling a story.
They tell a story. They tell a story. And often you look at that and you can't really work out what it is they're saying until you feel it.
No, I think, again, the only thing I would like to say to that is beautifully said, but feeling is the first language of humanity. Before we're pre-verbal for, you know, the first 18 months of our existence. We're navigating through feeling. And everyone, you know, the imprint of that is so great within us. And yet, once we can speak, we rely on words, but then a beautiful, a dark or a beautiful song is an expose in feeling. A great piece of poetry is going to make you feel that this is how it communicates. This is the great strength of its communication. It doesn't make you think. It makes you feel.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with
you. You know, I'm not in love by 10cc.
Yeah.
I'd been in Australia for working in the outback, and then I came back and my friend said, there's an incredible song called I'm Not in Love with 10cc. And I thought, oh, really? 10cc? You've got to be joking. And then I listened to it, and of course, just it's an incredible expose in feeling. It's beautiful. My God.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's a good example, actually. Just wanted to ask a little bit, because what I know that you've got lots of friends and lots of you know, like druids and all sorts of people. Do you think that was something that? Oh, okay. You said about that program that you did about charting, the search for spirituality or whatever, you know, that we have in this country. Or would you say that connection had something to do with some of your journey where you've been? Because there is a bit of a feeling that we're sort of reconnecting with something that resonates with us from the past. I don't quite know what that is, because we've lost a lot. You know, it's a bit disconnected, isn't it, from our past?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think we're all indigenous in some way, and therefore, you know, in the West, we arrogantly point at the tribal peoples of Vanuatu, or the tribal peoples of the Amazonian rainforest, or, as I did earlier, our brothers and sisters from the Sami lands. But I'm indigenous, you're indigenous, and it is what informs that identity. Is it Facebook, or you know, I'm not decrying Facebook, or email, or is it the sound, the particular sound that the wind on this island makes when it blows through the trees on this island? Is that part of making my blood what it is? I would say most definitely yes. And therefore I would say what we're kind of, the journey I feel that we're creeping, we're not walking, we're still very gingerly stepping along, is a journey back into connection with the natural world. And because unless we take that journey, we are really heading for trouble.
Yes, I totally agree.
I don't use that as a threat. I use that as a great hope that when we learn, when I accept that I am an interdependent life form, that I cannot exist without all the other life forms around me, providing me with food and providing my body with its ability to function. That changes everything, and I think as a culture we're beginning to open our eyes and go, well, if that's the case, if that's the reality, then that changes everything.
I agree. And on that point, for me, with music, I got to a sort of an understanding about, well, it's called biophony, you know, it's the sound around you, you know.
I didn't know that. What a wonderful word.
Yeah, it is. And being in a place like this, of course, you know, you're only going to step outside. And, you know. And all musical cultures use their biophony. So if you go to the Amazon, you know, all the rhythmic patterns are imitating crickets and you know, frogs and all the rest of it, and in the rhythm structure of the song.
Absolutely.
And that's true if you went to, you know, Arabic nations.
Yes,
you know,
of course.
It's the sound of the wind.
Yes.
In the desert, you know, and
I've always known that.
Yes.
But it's never been said. It's never been spoken.
And I think if you go back to English folk music, and of course we don't know what it sounded like because the Industrial Revolution was so far away, you know, so back in time. But if you look at the words of English folk songs, talking about blackbirds and thrushes, you know, and you know whatever this tree was and all the rest of it, there's a deep connection with the landscape.
Absolutely.
And also what made people human, how they dealt with problems, you know, how they negotiated with nature in order to exist.
Yes.
You're right?
Yes.
And all music's got its own biophony, even if it's, you know, something that's like, obviously in the case of things like certain types of rock music, it's to do with machinery, you know. And rock and roll's the same thing, it's this idea of the train for blues and whatever. And I think once you start, what I'm saying is that, you know, the journey that you can take, I've taken with music, is that I start to see things and you go like, well, that's a revelation to me about how things fit together, you know, in whatever way you want to look at it. And in that way, by us connecting back to, as you say, you know, what we've got, you know, in nature, has got to be.
It is the cradle.
It's got to be where we're going.
Whether I'm living in Electric Avenue in Brixton or whether I'm living in the beautiful village that I live in, it is that biophony is the cradle of our understanding of where we are. It is both our kind of map, but also it is a constant invitation to step into it and outside.
Which is interesting because it actually takes us back to that story you were telling of the Sami.
Mm.
You know, going to listen to the music of
The river.
or
The trees.
or the silver birch,
Or the silence.
Yeah,
A hard thing to do.
yeah, exactly. Because you know, in that way, nature speaks to you.
Yes.
You know,
I think, again, to go back to your original question, I think, yes, perhaps we're beginning to step out on a journey where we are beginning to understand that we're not separate. When we talk about nature, we are nature.
yes,
And that, I hope the fruit of that will be a great healing of our relationship with the planet. But I'm getting old and gnarly now, so I'm not sure.
as am I. So I think on that note, thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you.
You're ever so busy. And it's lovely to sit here.
It is lovely to sit here. I don't think I've ever sat on this sofa for so long.
With the cuddly toys.
With the cuddly toys, of course.
Unfortunately, they won't be able to see that. But
There was a band,
I particularly like that teddy, the big teddy bear.
Isn't he lovely? Yeah, there was a band called the Cuddly Toys.
Yes.
They were a punk band.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played with them.
Oh, you did you?
No, that was a long time ago. I don't have much memory
What, the actual playing? Or
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, okay. So it was obviously a full scale. Yeah, it was the proper punk ethos.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thanks ever so much, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank Peter for his time. And it's interesting when you meet somebody who's got such a deep, thoughtful reflection on life. Because I think there's so much that we can discover about music in that way. Just in the same way as music can reflect deep aspects of our own lives back to us. So yeah, food for thought. Until next time.